Thank you, thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Setahin. I'm really honoured to be here this morning, and I'm deeply grateful to Minbar for inviting me to be the first ambassador to attend this august gathering. I know you have had a huge number of very senior speakers at town hall events and Minbar space events, so I'm really delighted to be here. And I should start by saying that it's not often that as British Ambassador I'm able to interact with such a young demographic group, so it's nice to see people in the audience who are much younger than me and much younger than the usual people that I meet every day. So I'm very, very happy to be here, and thank you for the lovely picture. This picture shows you that I only own one suit, one shirt and one tie. Okay? I've got different underwear on though, but anyway, that's a separate story. So look, I'm really, really happy to be here, and I don't want to give you a hugely long introductory presentation about UK-Somalia relations or the British government's priorities in Somalia, because I hope we can keep the session as interactive as possible in the questions that come up from the moderator, Mohammed, and from all of you. So please don't be shy about putting your hand up. Even if it is not a question, if it is a comment or an observation, we are here not just to tell you what we are doing, we're here to learn what your priorities are and to hear from different voices. So otherwise it will be a bit of a dull question and answer session. So I'd like to start by just stressing a few things. I mean, the first is to say just how important the UK-Somalia relationship is. We can go back as far as you want. I am 57 years old, so I'm almost as old as Somalia. Not quite, but almost as old as Somalia. But actually, when we talk about relations, we tend to factor in when the UK reopened our embassy in Mogadishu, which was in 2012. So for the last 12 years, the London Somalia conference that happened in 2012, there was another one in 2017. We're now well into our second decade back in Somalia, and the progress that you will have seen in Mogadishu and in the country has happened alongside the UK here being one of your closest diplomatic partners and friends. And my job is, of course, to manage and promote, protect and advance the UK's relations now, tomorrow, next week, but it's also about laying the foundations for the longer term, and I hope we can maybe touch on some of those aspects. I'm really here to tell you what a strong state the current bilateral relationship is in, and why I am confident that we can take it to an even higher level because of the foundations that have been put in place by my predecessors and many, many others in the Somali system. And I want to talk to you a little bit about, yes, specifically the bilateral relationship, but also some of the issues around security, politics, defence, economic growth, development, education, climate change, to just give you a sense of the breadth of activity that we are focused on and which touches the lives of so many Somali citizens day in, day out. But before I do that, I just wanted to say how saddened we were by the terrible attack on Lido Beach on the 2nd of August. I know that Mogadishu knows about dreadful, abhorrent attacks, but this one was particularly awful, and it struck really at the heart of where you see the future of Somalia, because that shows you the progress that has been made. People out socialising, spending time with their families, going to the beautiful coastline, and then, you know, the nightmare of a horrendous Al-Shabaab attack. So our thoughts and condolences are with those affected and obviously the people of Somalia. In terms of the bilateral partnership that I referred to, we were very lucky that His Excellency President Hassan Sheikh visited the UK last November on a guest of government visit. He saw senior members of the British government, including our Prime Minister, Foreign Minister, Africa Minister, and Security Minister and Armed Forces Ministers, as well as doing round tables and activities at a global food security summit, attending a RUSI lecture that he spoke at. But it culminated with him signing a UK-Somalia strategic partnership, which had 4 very key elements. One was around inclusive and accountable governance, the second on security and defence, the third on growing the economy, and the fourth on human development and climate resilience. And within those 4 main building blocks, that broadly covers the priorities that I and my team in the embassy in Mogadishu deal with. And I should have started by saying that with me in the audience today is our communications team. So Georgina, Samira and Ahmed, who are the communications team for the Somalia team and the British Embassy in Mogadishu, which is in 3 main locations. Yes, we are here in Mogadishu, but we also have a team in Hargeisa, and we have a group of colleagues in Nairobi who visit regularly. So we have a very broad, diverse and expert team covering all of those 4 areas. And essentially, we are fully committed to the federal government of Somalia's agenda and aspiration for the country to be at peace with itself and at peace with the rest of the world. And the UK, I hope, is a very close, committed, sustained, critical friend to Somalia in all of that. If we look at the recent past and look at some of the international successes that Somalia has achieved, whether it is achieving HIPC completion point, thereby reducing very significantly the level of debt that the country has been burdened with, or the lifting of the arms embargo, or joining of the East Africa community, or the New York event to talk about Somalia's security development plan, the UK has had input into all of those aspects. I mean, the success rests with the government, the people, the experts of Somalia, but I'd like to think that the UK has made a positive contribution to those successes, and maybe highlight 2 key ones. One is that on climate change, the UK was very much responsible, along with our US friends, in helping Somalia join the task force for climate change and climate finance, which met in the margins of COP28 in Dubai. And that has been hugely important because the UK has announced £100 million of funding over the next 4 years, specifically to address Somalia's climate adaptation needs. And that task force role enabled Somalia to have a much louder voice internationally, thereby helping attract more green climate finance to the country. So the executive director of the Green Climate Finance Fund visited, and since then I think an announcement has been made of $40 million of funding to come to Somalia. It's just a start, but it's an important start. And if you look at the country's plans for where they want the country to be in 2060, when you celebrate your 100-year anniversary, starting now will be important to take you through that next 35 years or so. And then the other I think I should just mention is the fact that within the UN Security Council, where the United Kingdom is one of the permanent members of the Security Council, we are the pen holder within the Security Council for all things to do with Somalia, and we are pleased and congratulate the country for its success in joining the Security Council, because Somalia will be a member of the Security Council from the 1st of January for 2025 and 2026. And we are talking to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and people at Village Somalia about how we support the Somali delegation, which will have increased roles and responsibilities of being a member of the 15-member Security Council. In terms of some of the key aspects of what we work on, and we can maybe pick up some of the detail in the questions. I touched on the terrible attack at Lido Beach. I mean, security counter-terrorism, defence, those are incredibly important elements of what the UK is trying to do to support the country. We have, in the last 6 years, trained 3,000 Somali National Army troops at a location outside of Mogadishu. We have plans to do another 2,000 before the end of this year. Many of those troops have been at the command and leadership level, which is an area of significant need for the SNA specifically, but also for the wider security forces. And we've also done some bespoke training in areas of medical provision, counter-IED, sometimes alongside the EU training mission, where we have worked extremely closely. And we have many UK military personnel here, not in a active service capacity, but in a role where they are supporting the Somali Ministry of Defence. They are embedded into the African Union mission ATMIS. They are with the UNSOM mission. They are with UNSOS, and they are providing sort of military planning expertise to support the efforts of the Somali system. And indeed, we have for the last several years been financially supporting the Africa Union mission with stipends, and the UNSOS Trust Fund, which does so much of the logistics to support both ATMIS and SNA troops who are out in the field. And that's a really critically important element of the UK's role, because we are now in this process where, as you know, ATMIS is drawing down, and the plans for a follow-on mission, which will be smaller with a clearer exit strategy from 2025, are now actively being discussed in the UN Security Council, having been talked about in the African Union and in the Commission. So that's a really important element of what we do. And just to give you a sense of what that means in practical terms, one of our counter-terrorism programs, for example, has been for the last 10 years to support the Goodyear Police Unit, which is a rapid reaction police team, which was one of those that responded to the Lido Beach attack. So we have specific UK experts training the Somali police, and I have been 3 times to visit them and have seen myself how impressive and how motivated those Somali police officers are in learning new skills. In terms of economic growth and resilience, this is such an important element to the state-building agenda in Somalia, where clearly the country wants to try and generate more revenue so that it has more income available to support the citizens of Somalia with health, education and other services. And we hope, obviously so much money is eaten up by the fight against Shabab, the security requirements in Somalia. That's unlikely to change anytime soon, but we can already see on the face of the city of Mogadishu some of the change that has happened in recent years, and if more of that can be effected, that will be of benefit to the wider populace, alongside, of course, some of the investments that are made privately by companies here, but also by diaspora, including from the UK, of which there are many. We have a very active healthcare, education and humanitarian programme. So some of those programs on developing services for women and children are extremely important in terms of the UK being the largest bilateral donor to the Ministry of Health. And we're also one of the largest donors to the education sector here through 2 big programs called the Global Programme for Education and Education Cannot Wait. And I know, for example, having talked to the Education Minister several times, there is a long way to go. But when you see the recruitment of new teachers happening year on year, being sent to locations around the country, and you witness the number of young Somalis who wrote their high school exams just a few weeks ago, that shows you the progress that is being made, and I like to think that UK support has been influential in that area. We all know that the humanitarian needs, where there are so many people who are food insecure or displaced in Somalia, are enormous. And after many years of drought and then terrible El Nino floods, that sort of cycle of food insecurity is one that is incredibly hard to respond to. But last year the UK provided over £50 million of humanitarian support. And it's not just about dealing with the challenges of today, it's also about building resilience for the longer term. And the UK, again, is one of the leaders working very closely with other partner donors, but also UN agencies and organisations like SODMA, that actually my embassy is meeting today to prepare for what might be around the corner. Let me just maybe conclude with a couple of comments on how important education is once children are into the higher education sphere. So when we look at a population that is as thirsty as Somalia's for learning and for aspiration, we think that education is an area that requires even more investment. And I hope that over time we might be able to build some of those higher education links that the UK has with other countries, particularly other countries that have strong UK linkages through diaspora. So I have served in the past in India, Pakistan and Ghana. Those are all countries that have a lot of students studying in the United Kingdom, and we would like to see Somali students having that opportunity. Or, because the financial requirements are high, if they are not able to do that in the UK, how might some of those programmes be delivered locally? So one of the things we'd like to think about is how do we help enhance the learning offer that is available to young Somalis who are looking to enhance their knowledge in one way or another. And I want to finish really by telling you about a specific programme that the UK Foreign Ministry runs called the Chevening Scholarship Programme, which we can send you details of. But over the last several decades, we've had a programme running internationally. It's been running in Somalia for the last 8 years, where we have encouraged young Somalis who tend to be people who have started their professional careers but are very early on in those careers, who are looking to get more experience and are looking to, as soon as they have had that education, return to their country of origin and use that experience to reach their own potential, but also contribute to the country's needs and demands. And I'm happy to say that over those last 8 years, over 100 Somalis have been on these education programmes to the UK. It's usually a 10 to 12 month master's programme in the UK, running from sort of September through to June. And it's striking to see the different universities in the UK that Somalis have gone to, many of the top Russell Group universities, and I have met several of those Chevening alumni who are back in Mogadishu and elsewhere doing really important work. And what we're trying to do is spot Somalia's future leaders, and I am sure that several of them are in this audience today. So if the Chevening programme is of interest to you, please do let us know. There is an alumni network now across the globe of over 50,000 Chevening alumni, which in itself is an incredible club to be a member of. And I think we've got some initiatives we'd like to do to bring the Somalia alumni specifically together, because it's so important that if Somalia is going to achieve its aspirations, it needs those experts to have brought back some of their knowledge from internationally back to the country as well. So please do look out for that. I'll maybe conclude by just saying a couple of words about me. So I've been ambassador since May 2023, so now over 15 months. And I'm not saying this just to endear myself to you, but this has been the most fascinating job of my career. I mean, I've just given you really a very, very brief highlight of some of the activities that we work on. Beneath each of those priorities I've mentioned, there's a huge amount of work done by a number of talented diplomats and country-based staff in those 3 locations I mentioned, but also back in London. But it is an incredibly motivating role to be in. Naturally, it has its ups and downs, just as any country has its ups and downs, so does a British embassy, has its challenges, has its risks, and it has its opportunities. But it's incredibly rewarding and a great privilege to be a senior British government representative representing my country in as fascinating a place as Somalia. And I hope in my remaining time here, I'm able to advance some of that agenda. I tend to work, like most of us who are in Mogadishu, quite hard because there's plenty to do, and Somalis don't seem to take much time off at weekends. So my WhatsApp and my telephone are going quite often, and my email inbox is always full. But when I'm not working, I tend to be running. So I enjoy running. I do a bit too much of it on the treadmill, although occasionally I will go to the beach. I'm not quite as fast as Sir Mo Farah, but I aspire to be as fast as him one day. And maybe one day we can do some running initiatives, because young Somalis clearly have the athletic talent to reach the global stage. So it would be nice to find a way to spot some of that talent and nurture it. So I am a slightly obsessive runner. People usually, if they cannot find me in the office, they will find me in the gym. And if I'm not exercising, I'm usually reading books. So if you follow me on Twitter, and if you are not following me yet on Twitter, please follow me after today's session, because I don't have very many Twitter followers, and I'm trying to catch up with Taylor Swift to get 12 million followers. So please spread the word and follow me. But if you do follow me, you will know that I love reading books. And so if you have any book recommendations, particularly books about Somalia, historical, fiction, non-fiction, please let me know. And also, music, dance, culture is something that we don't have enough time to talk about. So it'd be good to hear your reflections. Please, a final appeal. Thank you. Firstly, thank you very much for listening patiently to me. I really do mean it, that I am a reasonably informal, relaxed person, despite my age and maturity. I do want to hear from you. I'm very open for you to tell me if you disagree with anything I've said. I'm very open to hear of an alternative view, or indeed if you have anything that you would like to ask me about the UK's role in Somalia. If any of you spend time on social media, you will know that it is a space that provokes quite excited opinions across the spectrum. It can be quite vitriolic in some places. Whenever I go to Hargeisa on a trip, I get a lot of angry messages about, what are you doing in Somaliland? You don't belong there. When I talk in Mogadishu about things that I'm doing here, I'll get some angry messages from people in Somaliland saying, who are you, British ambassador, all these sorts of things. Frankly, I'm sort of old enough to be able to handle those sorts of things. I'm more interested to know, what do people really think about the country? How can we collectively make it a better place? How should the UK learn from your expertise to do our jobs better? Because we are here, of course, first and foremost to enhance UK national interests. But if we have a more secure, stable, prosperous Somalia, that is important and good, first of all, for Somalia, but it's also fantastic for UK interests here in the region and back in the United Kingdom. I'm really grateful to you for listening. Thank you very much. It's a very interesting question. I don't think it is entirely a precedent that a member of the Security Council also has a UN mission in its country. So we will have to work out the best way to handle that. I should start by saying we have an existing strong relationship with the Somalia mission to the United Nations in New York. We deal with them on a very regular basis. Indeed, we are talking about Security Council resolutions this week for the follow-on mission to ATMIS, and we're engaging the Somalia mission in New York, and I'm talking to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Minister Fiki, Minister Ali Omar, about the specifics around that. So I think that will continue, and if anything, it will deepen and thicken. Whether there is an opportunity for some issues to be co-pen holder once Somalia is on the Security Council, we haven't really had that discussion yet, but I think my government would be very open to that. We are, I think, keen, first and foremost, to give Somalia whatever support they need to take on this enhanced role, right? They have a small team which is going to need to grow. How do we support them in doing that? That's the key, I think.
Yeah, perfect. I think we're just looking forward to the time when we can hold our own pens, so you can understand.
Of course. I mean, let me just say on that, you're quite right. I mean, I think a lot of the successes that I referred to are about Somalia's focus on re-engaging internationally on a whole range of these things. You know, joining the East Africa community, lifting the arms embargo, progress in the Human Rights Council. These are all aspects of building a state that requires, some of it can happen quickly, some of it requires incremental stages. So it's an aspiration that we share. Well, I would say, I mean, two things about that. Firstly, when we talk about groups that are perhaps overlooked,
yes,
I would say that, I mean, the youth could be one, but I would put women above that, right? I mean, let's look at this audience.
also make youth.
Right? No, of course, but let's look at the audience. What is the balance? Let us see what happens when we get through the elections process and we go to one person, one vote, and we have women's quotas. How many women MPs you have? How many women in leadership positions? So I would say any overlooked groups, any minority ethnic groups, youth, women, those are all areas that we all need to do more. I 100% agree. I did talk about education. That is very much focused on youth. And I would say that climate action, it's not that we are putting the requirement for action on the youth, but in addressing these issues and starting now, it's to hopefully establish, whether it's the United Kingdom or Somalia, a country that becomes better for the young as they grow up through the generations. So I absolutely agree. We mustn't overlook the importance of young people in trying to achieve some of these strategic goals, but I would argue that we are very focused on the whole population from that perspective. I don't accept that. I think the first and foremost, the legislative arrangements under which future elections are decided in Somalia is for the legislators and decision makers of Somalia. Let me just state the UK's position. We agree that increased democratisation and increased rights for individuals to exercise their vote is a good thing. It's a positive thing. If you're asking us, is direct elections better than indirect elections? The answer to that is very simply yes. But of course, that is a very big step, right? One person, one vote among a very young population, but there's still several million who are over the age of 18, is not easy to perform immediately. It takes a long time technically, legislatively to work. And there is an electoral timetable in between. Hence we see, you know, district elections were supposed to be in June, federal member state elections were supposed to be in November. The June deadline has missed, but we see these three bills that have been approved by the Cabinet. The NCC is going to discuss them. The UK, and I think the wider international community, supports the progress that Somalia wants to make in having a more inclusive electoral system. That's a fact, certainly a fact for the UK. I think the issue is, how does that happen on a timetable that is achievable so that we avoid unnecessarily lengthy delays which cause problems, right? I mean, I saw the Southwest opposition last week. I know that Jubaland opposition are worried about the timetable for elections. But equally, I cannot see how an indirect election, which is organised by a very small group of men, because they're always men, is also a good thing, right? So it's a natural tension that is within the system, which is absolutely part of the state building agenda and the constitutional reform. Well, I've had conversations with lots of those stakeholders, and I think each country will talk to the government in their own way about the progress and about the timetable for the chapters of the constitutional review. It's no secret the federal government of Somalia wants to make progress on those issues. And of course, building consensus is a very important part of moving things forward in a progressive way, but not at the expense of delay and no progress happening. And I think that has been one of the key problems, right? People will argue that the Constitution has not made much progress, or the reform progress since the transitional arrangements from 2012. And this federal government of Somalia is determined to change that in this term, so that by the time you get to 2026, federal presidential elections, the system is in place to be able to have made incremental progress. Doing that in a way that has broad-based support is, of course, going to be challenging, right? Because there are very, very different views. So we are, of course, watching that process, and that's why this week's NCC, if it happens, and the bills that go to Parliament, how they are amended, voted on, is also going to be critically important to that.
Thank you, Ambassador. I think democracy, also calls for freedom of speech. And I will not be very inaccurate if I say it's lacking in this country. I mean, over the last couple of months, journalists were arrested in this country. So, as a champion for democracy, have you thought of, or have you put pressure on the government to ease freedom of expression with regard to the media, how they cover arbitrary arrest and detention of the media across the country, not here in Mogadishu as well?
Yeah, no, we're very focused on the freedom of speech, the draft bills that are coming to Parliament, but even I would go further than that. I would say the wider human rights agenda across the board is something that we are very focused on. I think it's fair to say Somalia has made progress in a number of areas. Where there are specific cases, if we have any concerns, we will, have those conversations in private with the government. There have been cases in the past that I have talked to specific ministers about that we've been asked to raise with the federal government, or indeed with federal member states, and we will continue to do so. But we want to do it in a way that moves things forward in a progressive environment.
Ambassador, the UK has investment in Berbera Economic Zone, and I think that's together with DP World, Ethiopia and Somaliland. But then there was this whole 1st of January this year, the MOU that was signed between Somaliland and Ethiopia with this government, actually the Parliament and the Cabinet all deemed illegal. And now, is the government of Somalia, the federal government of Somalia, abreast of the UK investment in the Berbera Economic Zone? And it's a little bit of an emotional topic for Somalis, especially in the south. And the view has been that the UK has been silent on coming out to support the territorial integrity of Somalia with regard to the MOU between Somaliland and Ethiopia. Yeah,
well, so let me be clear that we have reaffirmed our respect for Somalia's territorial integrity, sovereignty. That indeed was done by one of our ministers in the new government, which came to office on the 5th of July, so just last month. And there'll be an opportunity for us with our ministers to talk about Somalia, Somaliland, wider regional issues in the coming weeks. So I have no concerns, and have talked to many ministers from His Excellency the President downwards about the UK's commitment towards that. I mean, the UK's interest is in trying to see a peaceful resolution to this issue. It's not a good thing that there is tension in the Somalia-Ethiopia relationship. There is tension in the Somalia-Somaliland relationship. We're all waiting to see what happens in Ankara, because there is, with our Turkish friends who are hosting talks between Somalia and Ethiopia's foreign ministries and foreign ministers and other delegates there. We're waiting to see if anything positive comes out of that. And the key, I think, is to lower the temperature, try and find areas of overlapping interest in which to build confidence, and hopefully seek a way forward that resolves the issue. But it's very difficult, right? Somaliland wants independence. President Musa Bihi is very positive about the MOU. Ethiopia wants not just sea access, wants Red Sea access, and has stated that they want to...
And every time they call for independence, they refer to the fact that they were a British colony.
Yeah. but they're not a British colony anymore, right? So, you know, the government, I think the federal government of Somalia understands very well the equities that the UK has in this region, right? We are in Somaliland because we have a long-standing relationship with that region, and we have significant interests. You know, you only have to look at the UK diaspora to see that Somalia and Somaliland is reflected in the UK in the scale of the diaspora. So that is not going to change. The key is for me to be able to do that in a transparent, open way and properly brief people about what I'm doing and what I'm saying. And I think the UK is not involved in a negotiation between Somalia and Ethiopia or Somalia and Somaliland. That is first and foremost for the elected representatives of those areas. But we are very supportive and very interested in what is happening, and anything we can do behind the scenes to move things peacefully forward is really important, because you know that Ethiopia has, you know, a stake in Somalia's security and future through its representation on ATMOS across different regions of the country. There's a lot at stake.
It doesn't offer carte blanche, for Ethiopia to go ahead and sign MOU with the region of Somalia.
Was that a question or a comment?
No, it's a comment.
And the one about the British Council are sort of linked, because it's basically we're not providing those services locally, and that is a burden on Somalis, because a burden on expense and time, because those are available elsewhere. You know, I'm sorry that we are not able to locally on the ground deliver visa applications to Somalis wanting to visit the United Kingdom, or British Council learning opportunities for things to be done, whether that is courses in English or examinations in IELTS. That's happened in those countries that I was telling you about. We had very big setups for that. I cannot promise that we are going to immediately be able to deliver those services. I think it would be wrong of me if I implied that we are, but it is very much linked to the state building agenda. If things move in a positive direction, I hope that one day we will be able to deliver many of those services locally. I'll maybe say two things about that. One is, we are planning to build a new British embassy in Mogadishu, probably on the same location that we are at the moment. That is a big investment for His Majesty's government, and it'll take some time to be established, but it might offer a scope to do more in way of services that we deliver. And I would say as well that when it comes to visas, because the Somali international global diaspora are in places like the United States, Australia, Europe, in terms of the Nordics particularly, there could well be a way of all of those international countries sharing that service, right? So we don't all need to set up a different visa service. We could have a shared service somewhere in the airport area if we don't want to base it outside there. So it's something I've had initial discussions with one or two of the UN agencies about. I don't want to overstate how soon it will happen, but it absolutely is something that we recognise, the additional transactional costs of having to travel internationally just to access some of those services. And likewise, the British Council, which is the UK's education, arts and cultural arm, does fantastic work. We would like them to take to have more focus on Somalia, but I think it's going to be a challenge to do that in the near term. Let us see what we can do in the more medium term. In terms of the scholarship that you referred to, so I was talking about Chevening, which is Chevening, chevening.org. That is how you will find out information, but we can share with Minbar the web link. There's a deadline of early November to apply for a Chevening scholarship, and the scholarship is fantastic because it's basically all of the costs of tuition and then a grant for the accommodation. I can't remember about the travel. I think you may have to pay for your own travel, but it's basically everything, all of the in-country costs are taken care of for the period that you are in country. It's a very competitive process, and we have a very transparent interview panel that goes through the sifting and then interviews people, and we will do that over the next few months. So if you're interested, do look out for that. What does that say? The what?
Follow on Twitter for information about you.
Okay, brilliant. Or Foreign Office website?
Twitter.
Or Twitter, sorry.
X, it's called now.
X, yes. So on our account, UK and Somalia, right? UK and Somalia on X is where you can find much more information. Thank you very much. And then, sir, your question about youth. So I cannot say that we have one single development programme that is specifically for young people. I would argue, however, that the £150 million a year that the UK puts into programmes in Somalia touches on youth across the board. So whether it is green urban growth, whether it is Somalia Stability Fund, whether it is supporting inclusive growth, whether it is helping the government raise more revenue on services, those are all whether it's specific humanitarian healthcare needs, whether it's education of young people, all of those programmes have a very significant youth component to them. But yes, I mean, if we were looking at a new programme, how do we support specifically young people aged 18 to 25 or 18 to 34? You know, that's something we could potentially look at. I couldn't agree more with you on private sector opportunities. I mean, we think, again, that is linked, of course, to security and stability, but you can see the way the city of Mogadishu has changed in recent years, just how much scope there is for growth. And one of the things about Somalis is their entrepreneurial flair. We can see that in the telecoms, money transfer, some of the financial services sector here. Could that be unleashed in other sectors? I suspect so. There are plans to open up the blue economy, water sector, fisheries, whatever it might be. So I really think that the private sector has an enormous contribution to make, but the conditions need to be created to allow that to happen. And I know, having spoken to British Somalis, they of course have a higher appetite for coming into the country than foreigners who don't have a link with Somalia. I think there would be much, much more that could happen if the conditions are right. So I agree very much with you. Just on the scholarships, because the question that you made and the question from the gentleman at the end, and indeed it's come up several times, I think it's going to be difficult to expand the Chevening scheme. I mean, we are very lucky that thanks to sponsorship from Hormuz and Dahabshil, right, which are the two biggest companies, we are able to deliver, because each scholarship is a very expensive undertaking. We can try and see, maybe through your links we can find some more sponsors, but if we can get more sponsors, we could perhaps enhance the number of Somalis who are able to achieve the scholarship. And yes, I'm happy to look at whether there are other British universities with Somali links who might be interested in offering grants. I doubt they would be able to do fully funded scholarships, but they may be able to do something that supports a reduction in fees that allows Somalis to access that education. It's very important. The gentleman's questions about, well, I don't think I need to cover the sort of UK-Somalia thing, because that was mainly what my remarks were about. Just on African Union mission, yes, this is a very critical 4-month period, because you all know that AMISOM before it and then ATMIS has been here for 17 years, and the plan is that the number of African Union troops that are in Somalia goes down as the Somali National Army takes on more responsibility for Somalia's security and the fight against Shabab, and we support the country in that. The mission that follows on and the scope of it, the size of it, the funding for it, these are all really critical elements, and they're going to require the FGS, the troop contributing countries and international partners to work very hard to get that right over the next few months, so that we don't leave a security vacuum in the meantime. And that is a big priority for the UK as one of the sort of key security partners. So we will try very hard to help Somalia make a success of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. We'll take one more round of questions, but perhaps I will add a comment.
Oh, there's a woman who wants to ask.
Yes, right. Actually, we'll prioritize women again. I think the question on Chevening scholarships keep coming back. You mentioned 8 years of Chevening scholarship in this country, and that there are over 50,000 Chevening alumni across the country, across the world. Maybe we should tap into the Somali chapter, and they offer career advice and actually offer some of these questions they could have answered if they're in the country, because if they're running 8 years.
Yeah.
They should
No, I mean, I mentioned there's 100 Somalis who have been through this program in 8 years. I mean, some of them are in senior positions here in Mogadishu. I'm sure they would be better advocates for this than me. And if we want to try and organise some sort of alumni event, we would be happy to host that at the embassy at some point.